The night my daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Go to a hotel. My parents are here." Something inside me cracked in a way I didn't think was possible at my age. I was standing in the hallway of the house I had paid half the down payment for, holding a casserole dish I had spent all afternoon preparing, and my own son was standing behind her, silent, staring at the floor like a stranger. An hour later, the same people who told me to leave were begging for a divorce. Was I wrong for what I did next? Tell me honestly, if you were treated like that in your own son's home, would you have walked away quietly? I still replay that moment in my head sometimes. The smell of garlic and rosemary from the dish in my hands. The sound of laughter coming from the living room where her parents were sitting comfortably on the couch I helped choose. The way she crossed her arms, chin lifted, like I was some delivery woman who had overstayed her welcome. "We need privacy," she said, her tone cold and rehearsed. "My parents are here for the weekend. It's awkward if you stay. Just get a hotel." She didn't even lower her voice. Her mother was watching from behind her, pretending not to listen, but her eyes were sharp, measuring me. "Let me take you back to the beginning, because this didn't happen overnight. My name is Farah. I'm 58 years old, and I raised my son, Ion, by myself after my husband died when Ion was only 8. I worked 2 jobs for years. I skipped vacations, new clothes, even medical checkups sometimes, just to make sure he had everything he needed. He was my only child, my entire world. When he got into university, I cried tears of pride. When he got his first job in tech, I told everyone in my neighborhood like I had personally won an award. And when he told me he wanted to marry Zara, I tried to welcome her with open arms. Zara was beautiful, confident, and came from a wealthy family. The first time I met her parents, I felt small in my simple cotton suit, while her mother wore gold bangles that probably cost more than my monthly salary. But I told myself none of that mattered. What mattered was that my son looked happy. That was enough for me. At least, that's what I thought. In the beginning, Zara was polite to me. Not warm, not affectionate, but polite. She would call me Amy in front of Ion, but when we were alone, her tone changed slightly. Subtle things at first. "You don't need to cook, I'll handle it. You don't have to worry about the house." It sounded respectful, but there was always an edge, like she was gently pushing me out of a space I had always occupied. When they got married, they couldn't afford a house on their own. Zara's parents offered a loan, and I offered my savings. I emptied almost everything I had saved for retirement, so they could buy a modest home close to my apartment. The agreement was simple. I would stay with them for a few months while they settled in, help with the house, and then decide what to do next. Ion insisted. "Amy, this is your home too," he said. "You sacrificed your whole life for me." But as soon as we moved in, things shifted. Zara began making small rules. We don't eat dinner that late. We don't watch TV in the living room after 9. Please knock before coming into the kitchen when I'm cooking. It was always we. But the rules never applied to her parents when they visited. They could sprawl on the sofa, criticize the decor, even rearrange things I had placed carefully. I tried to stay quiet. I told myself this was her home now too. A young couple needs space. Maybe I was being sensitive. But then came the comments. One evening, while we were having tea, her mother laughed and said, "It must be hard for young couples to start their life with extra baggage." She glanced at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I felt my cheeks burn, but I smiled politely. Ion laughed awkwardly. Zara said nothing. That night, I cried in my room for the first time since my husband's funeral. Still, I stayed. I cooked. I cleaned. I ironed Ion's shirts the way he liked. I reminded myself that love sometimes means swallowing your pride. The real tension began when Zara got pregnant. I was overjoyed. I started knitting tiny sweaters, imagining holding my grandchild. But Zara grew distant. "We're thinking of hiring a nanny," she said one day. I was surprised, but I'm here. I replied gently. I can help. She gave me a tight smile. I want professional help, not old-fashioned methods. Old-fashioned methods. As if I hadn't successfully raised the very man she married. Her parents started visiting more often during the pregnancy. They brought expensive baby furniture, fancy gadgets I had never seen before. Each visit felt like an inspection. Her father once said, while looking around the kitchen, "It's important for a baby to grow up in a modern environment." I knew what he meant. I didn't belong in their version of modern. Ian became quieter as months passed. Whenever I tried to talk to him alone, Zara somehow appeared. If I expressed concern about anything, he would say, "Amy, please don't create stress. Zara is sensitive right now." I began to feel like a guest in a house that held my life's savings. Then the baby was born, a beautiful little girl, Sophia. The first time I held her, I felt something heal inside me. I thought maybe this would bring us together. For a short while it did. Zara was exhausted, and I took over night feedings, diaper changes, rocking Sophia to sleep. Even her mother admitted once, "You're good with her." But gratitude never lasted long in that house. One afternoon, I overheard Zara whispering to her mother in the kitchen. "I can't breathe with her here all the time," she said. "It's like she's watching me, judging me." My heart sank. I had done nothing but help. Her mother replied, "You need to establish boundaries now. This is your home. If you don't, she'll never leave." That word, leave, I had nowhere else to go. My old apartment was rented out to cover part of the mortgage. All my money was tied up in this house. Still, I tried to make myself smaller. I spent more time in my room. I stopped offering advice. I stopped humming while cooking because once Zara said it gave her a headache. And then came that weekend. Her parents announced they were staying for 3 days. No one asked me. They simply informed me. I spent the entire Friday cooking elaborate meals to make a good impression. Biryani, korma, fresh naan. My back ached, but I told myself kindness always wins. When they arrived, her mother walked past me like I was staff. Her father shook Ion's hand warmly and barely nodded at me. They settled into the guest room, which used to be my sewing room before Zara decided it would look classier as a guest suite. Saturday evening, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I heard raised voices in the living room. Zara was complaining about space. "It's too crowded," she said loudly. "We need privacy." I didn't think much of it until she walked into the kitchen, followed by Ion. She didn't smile. She didn't soften her tone. "Go to a hotel. My parents are here." I thought I misheard her. "What? Just for the weekend?" she said impatiently. "It's uncomfortable. We want family time." Family time. Was I not family? I looked at Ion. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Amy, it's just 2 nights." He muttered. "We'll pay for the hotel." Pay for the hotel? With whose money? The same joint account my savings were in. In that moment, something shifted inside me. Not anger, not even sadness. Just clarity. I placed the spoon down slowly. I wiped my hands on my apron. "You want me to leave my own house?" I asked quietly. Zara crossed her arms. "It's not your house. It's ours." That's when I realized she truly believed that. So that was the situation I was in. After sacrificing decades for my son, after investing everything into that home, I was being told to pack a bag and disappear because her parents needed the guest room and she needed privacy. Before I tell you what I did next, I want you to pause and think. If you were standing where I was, would you have quietly booked a hotel and left? Or would you have finally said enough is enough? Because what I did in the next hour changed everything. And by the time that hour was over, the same people who told me to leave were begging for a divorce. When she said, "It's not your house, it's ours," Something inside me went completely still, not broken, not shattered, just still, like the moment before a storm hits and the air goes heavy and quiet. I remember looking at my son's face, searching for even a flicker of guilt, some sign that he would step forward and say, "Zara, that's enough." But he just stood there, rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when he didn't want to deal with conflict. I nodded slowly as if I understood. "Okay," I said softly. Zara looked almost surprised that I didn't argue. Maybe she expected tears. Maybe she wanted a scene so she could paint me as dramatic in front of her parents. But I didn't give her that satisfaction. I walked calmly to my room and closed the door behind me. And that's when the memories started flooding in. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wardrobe. That same wardrobe I had assembled myself when we first moved in, because Ayan didn't have the tools and Zara said she didn't trust random handymen. I had built that wardrobe. I had chosen these curtains. I had painted these walls a soft beige because Zara once said she liked neutral tones. Every corner of that house had my fingerprints on it. I opened the drawer beside my bed and took out the brown envelope. I had kept copies of everything, the bank transfers, the agreement Zara's father had drafted when we combined funds for the down payment, the property papers that clearly listed all contributors. My name wasn't just a sentimental attachment to that house. It was legally tied to it. I didn't tell anyone that. When we bought the house, Zara's father had insisted the property be in Ayan's and Zara's names for simplicity. But because a large portion of the down payment came directly from my account, I had made sure to sign a private agreement with Ayan stating that my contribution gave me legal financial interest. He had signed it casually back then, saying, "Of course, Amy. This is your security." Security. That word felt ironic now. I stood up, wiped my tears before they could fall, and began packing a small suitcase. Not because I intended to leave, but because I needed them to think I would. As I folded my clothes, I could hear laughter from the living room. Zara's mother's voice floated down the hallway. "Young couples need boundaries," she was saying loudly. "Otherwise, elders never let go." Elders, as if I was some stubborn relic refusing to step aside. I zipped my suitcase and walked out into the hallway. All four of them were sitting there, Zara, her parents, and my son. Sophia was asleep in her crib upstairs. I walked past them without speaking and headed toward the front door. Zara stood up quickly. "You booked something already?" she asked, almost triumphant. I turned to face her. "No," I said calmly. "I'm going to the bank." Her smile faltered slightly. "Why?" "Because before I go anywhere," I replied, "we need to settle accounts." The room went silent. Her father straightened in his seat. "What do you mean by that?" I placed the brown envelope on the coffee table. "I mean," I said evenly, "that if I am no longer welcome in a house I helped pay for, then I will need my investment returned, in full." Zara laughed nervously. "What investment?" I opened the envelope and spread the documents out. Bank statements, transfer receipts, the signed agreement from Ayan acknowledging my financial contribution. Her father leaned forward to read them. His confident expression began to change. "This," he muttered, adjusting his glasses. "This is substantial." "Yes," I replied. "It is." Ayan finally looked up at me. "Amy, why are you doing this? It's just 2 nights." I felt something inside me finally ignite. "No," I said quietly but firmly. "It's not 2 nights. It's years of disrespect. It's being treated like a guest in my own home. It's listening to your wife and her parents discuss how to establish boundaries by pushing me out." Zara's face flushed. "You were listening to private conversations. I was cooking in my kitchen." I shot back. "In a house I paid for." Her mother gasped dramatically. "This is emotional blackmail." I laughed softly, and even I didn't recognize the sound. No, emotional blackmail would be me reminding you that I raised him alone, that I sacrificed everything, that I sold my jewelry to cover his university fees. But I'm not even asking for gratitude. I'm asking for basic respect. Her father cleared his throat. Let's calm down. We can discuss this rationally. Rationally, I asked. You told your daughter to establish boundaries by removing me. So let's be rational. Either I stay in my home with the respect I deserve, or you refinance this house and return my money. Today. Zara's confidence was completely gone now. We don't have that kind of cash available, she said. That's not my problem, I replied. Ion stood up abruptly. Amy, please. This is embarrassing. Embarrassing. I repeated. Being told to go to a hotel isn't embarrassing. Being erased from your own family isn't embarrassing. The air in the room felt thick. I could see the panic beginning to settle on Zara's parents' faces. They had assumed I was weak. Quiet, easy to push aside. They hadn't expected paperwork. Her father finally spoke, his tone no longer arrogant but cautious. How much are we talking about? I told him the exact figure, including the additional funds I had spent on renovations, furniture, and household expenses over the past year. Zara's mother's hand flew to her chest. That's outrageous. No, I said calmly. What's outrageous is telling a widow to book a hotel room so you can play happy family. Ion ran his hands through his hair. This is insane. We can't just pull that kind of money out of nowhere. I nodded. Then I will consult a lawyer tomorrow morning. The agreement is legally binding. That's when everything changed. Zara looked at Ion, panic flashing in her eyes. You signed something, she demanded. He swallowed. It was just a formality. A formality, she shrieked. Do you realize what this means if she forces a sale? I stayed silent, letting the realization sink in. Her father stood up abruptly. We need to speak privately, he said to Zara. No, I replied. There are no more private conversations about me. If you have something to say it here. Zara's composure completely cracked. This is manipulation. You're trying to ruin our marriage. I looked at her steadily. No, Zara, I am protecting myself. You're the one who told me to leave. The next few minutes were chaotic. Accusations, raised voices, blame flying in every direction. Zara turned on Ion. You never told me she had legal rights. You never asked, he shouted back. Her mother began whispering frantically to her husband about market values and mortgage penalties. The word sell came up more than once, and I stood there, oddly calm, because for the first time since she entered my life, I wasn't shrinking. After nearly 40 minutes of heated arguments between them, Zara finally looked at me, her face pale. What do you want? She asked quietly. It was the first time she had asked me that. I want respect, I said. And security. I will not leave this house. If you want privacy, you can book a hotel. Her parents looked horrified. Ion stepped toward me. Amy, please, let's just forget this. Can you forget it? I asked him. Can you forget your wife telling your mother to get out? He had no answer. That's when Zara said the words that truly shocked everyone. If this house isn't fully ours, she said slowly, staring at Ion, then maybe this marriage isn't what I thought it was. The room went silent again. Her father whispered sharply, Zara. But she kept going. I married you thinking we were building something independent, not tied to your mother's money and conditions. Conditions? I almost smiled. The only condition I had ever wanted was to not be treated like trash. Ion looked devastated. You're talking about divorce over this. She crossed her arms, her voice shaking but determined. I didn't sign up to fight your mother for control. And there it was. Not about hotels, not about privacy. It was about control. Within an hour of telling me to leave, the same people were panicking about lawyers, assets, and the possibility of their daughter walking out of the marriage. I didn't raise my voice again. I didn't cry. I simply said, if divorce is what you want, then perhaps it's better you decide now, because I am not disappearing. Zara's mother tried to intervene. Don't be dramatic. We can work this out. But Zara was already spiraling. You hid financial agreements from me, she accused Ion. What else have you hidden? He looked at me, eyes filled with regret, and for the first time, I saw fear in him, not of me, but of losing his marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had tried to push me out to protect their family image, and now that image was cracking from the inside. So that's how, within an hour of telling me to book a hotel, they were whispering about separation, about whether they had made a mistake, about lawyers and settlements. The power had shifted, and none of them knew how to handle it. But here's the thing. I didn't plan to destroy their marriage. I only wanted dignity. And now I was standing in the middle of a storm I never intended to create, watching my son's world unravel. Tell me honestly, if you had been in my place, would you have backed down to save their marriage? Or would you have finally stood your ground, even if it meant everything changed forever? Because what happened next didn't just shake their relationship. It exposed truths none of us were prepared to face. That night, no one slept. Not me, not Ion, and certainly not Zara. Her parents locked themselves in the guest room, whispering urgently on the phone to someone. I later found out it was their family lawyer. The house that had once echoed with forced politeness now felt like a battlefield after the first explosion. Everyone was calculating their next move. I stayed in my room, suitcase still near the door, not unpacked, not taken anywhere. I didn't want to give anyone the satisfaction of thinking I had second thoughts, but I also wasn't celebrating. I wasn't proud. I was exhausted. Standing up for yourself after years of swallowing disrespect isn't empowering at first. It's terrifying. Around midnight, I heard a knock on my door. It was soft, hesitant, Ion's voice. I didn't answer immediately. I needed him to understand that I wasn't going to rush to comfort him like I always had. After a few seconds, I opened the door. He looked like a little boy again, the same eyes he had when he scraped his knee at age 9. But this wasn't a scraped knee. This was the consequence of silence. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I stepped aside. He sat on the edge of my bed and buried his face in his hands. "What is happening?" he whispered. I leaned against the wall, arms folded. "You tell me." He looked up at me, eyes red. "Zara says she feels betrayed, that I hid things, that you're trying to control us. Am I?" I asked calmly. He shook his head quickly. "No, I know you're not. But she thinks you used your money to stay involved in our marriage." I stared at him. "Ion, I used my money to make sure you had a roof over your head. I never once interfered in your decisions. I never demanded anything." "I know," he said, "but she feels like we're not independent." I let out a slow breath. Independence doesn't mean erasing your mother. He didn't argue with that, because deep down, he knew it was true. Then he said something that changed everything. "She told me tonight that if this becomes a legal battle, she doesn't want to be part of it. She said she'll leave with Sophia." My heart stopped for a second. "Leave?" He nodded. "She says she can't raise her daughter in a house where there's tension and legal threats." I felt anger rise in me again, but not at him this time. At the manipulation, at the way she had twisted the narrative so quickly. "Did she tell you," I asked slowly, "that this all started because she told me to go to a hotel?" He didn't answer. "Did she tell you that her parents encouraged her to push me out?" He looked down. That was answer enough. "I never wanted this," he whispered. "I just wanted peace." I walked over and sat beside him. "Peace built on injustice doesn't last," I said gently. "You can't silence one person to keep another happy." He was quiet for a long time. Then he stood up and left without saying anything else. The next morning felt strange, too quiet. Zara didn't come out of her room until late. When she did, her eyes were swollen from crying, but her posture was rigid. Her parents looked tense, their usual superiority replaced with calculation. We all gathered in the living room without formally agreeing to. It was like everyone knew the conversation had to continue. Her father spoke first. We consulted our lawyer. He said, clearing his throat, "Technically, the private agreement is enforceable. Technically," Zara's jaw tightened, but, he continued, a legal dispute would be messy, costly, public. That word mattered to them. I nodded. I don't want a public dispute. I want acknowledgement. Zara finally spoke. "You blindsided us." I looked at her steadily. "You blindsided me." Her voice rose. "We asked for 2 nights. No, I corrected her. You told me to leave. There's a difference, and she knew it." Her mother tried to soften the tone. Emotions ran high. Let's not destroy a family over a misunderstanding. I almost laughed. A misunderstanding. Being told I didn't belong in my own home was not a misunderstanding. Ion looked exhausted. "What if we restructure things?" he suggested. "Amy keeps her share legally documented. No one forces anyone out. We set boundaries respectfully." Zara snapped her head toward him. "So you're choosing her side." And there it was again, sides, as if this was a war and not a family. "I'm choosing fairness," he replied quietly. That's when Zara stood up abruptly. "I can't do this," she said, pacing. "I feel trapped. Every corner of this house now feels like it belongs to her." I stayed silent, but inside, something shifted again. For months, I had felt like I was suffocating, and now she was describing the same feeling. "Maybe," I said slowly, "we're all feeling trapped." She stopped pacing and looked at me, surprised that I had spoken calmly. "I didn't move here to control you," I continued. "I moved here because my son asked me to, because I believed we could be a family." Her eyes flickered, but pride kept her steady. "Families don't threaten each other with lawyers. And daughters. In-law don't evict their mothers. In-law without discussion." I replied. The silence that followed was heavy but not explosive this time. It was thoughtful. Dangerous, but thoughtful. Then Zara said the words no one expected. "Maybe we rushed into this marriage." The air left the room. I unfroze. "What?" She didn't look at him. We were so focused on proving we could build something modern and independent that we never talked about what family really meant. Her father whispered sharply, "Zara, think carefully." But she kept going. "I don't want to fight every time your mother breathes differently than I do. I don't want to feel like I'm competing for space." Competing? I had never seen it that way. I wasn't competing. I was surviving. That's when I turned to her and asked something I had never asked before. "Why do you see me as a threat?" Her lips parted slightly, caught off guard. "Did I ever insult you? Did I ever criticize your parenting? Did I ever stop you from making decisions?" She hesitated. "No, but your presence, it reminds me that we're not fully on our own." And suddenly, I understood something deeper. This wasn't about money or hotels or even control. It was about identity. She had grown up in a house where independence meant separation, where marriage meant forming a new unit detached from parents. I had grown up believing family expands, not shrinks. Neither of us were entirely wrong, but we were colliding. Still, that didn't justify disrespect. By mid-afternoon, the tension escalated again. Zara told Ion privately, though not quietly enough, that she needed space, that she was considering staying with her parents until things were clearer. Her mother encouraged it. Her father looked worried about optics, and then it happened. Zara walked into the living room with Sophia in her arms and said, "I think we need a break. Maybe even a separation." Ion looked like someone had punched him. "A separation," he repeated. She nodded, tears in her eyes now. I can't live in constant conflict. And here's where I need you to pause with me, because at that moment I had a choice. I could have softened. I could have said, "It's okay, I'll leave." I could have sacrificed my dignity to save their marriage. Many mothers would. Many mothers do. So tell me, what would you have done? Would you have packed your bag quietly and removed yourself to keep your son's family intact? Or would you have stood firm, even if it meant risking everything? Because I didn't move. I didn't beg. I didn't apologize for defending myself. I simply said, if you believe divorce is the answer, then perhaps the foundation was weaker than we realized. Her parents looked horrified that I didn't crumble. Ayan looked torn between fear and awakening. Zara left that afternoon with Sophia and her parents. Suitcases packed in silence, no dramatic shouting, just cold distance. The house felt emptier than it ever had before. Ayan stood in the doorway long after their car disappeared. When he turned to look at me, his face wasn't angry. It was shattered. Did we just lose everything? He whispered. I didn't have an answer, because part of me feared we had. But another part of me knew something else. You can't build a future on the erasure of someone who helped create it. And as the door closed behind us, I realized the real storm hadn't even begun yet. The house felt hollow after Zara left with Sophia. Not quiet in a peaceful way, but quiet in the way hospitals feel at night. Like something fragile is hanging in the air, waiting to either survive or collapse. Ayan didn't speak much that evening. He sat at the dining table long after sunset, staring at nothing, his phone in his hand but untouched. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, and for the first time in years, I didn't know how to comfort him. Because this time, I wasn't just his mother. I was part of the reason his marriage was breaking, or at least, that's what he might have believed. Around 9 p.m., his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and inhaled sharply. It's Zara, he muttered. He answered immediately, stepping into the living room. I didn't mean to listen, but the house was too silent not to hear fragments. I never said I wanted a divorce, he said quickly. You're the one who said separation. Pause. No, she didn't threaten us. She just defended herself. Another pause, longer this time. What do you mean your lawyer thinks it's risky? My stomach tightened. He paced back and forth, running his hand through his hair again. So, what are you suggesting? Silence. Then his voice dropped. You want me to ask her to sign away her claim. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. What? I whispered. He turned toward me slowly, his expression conflicted. Zara says if you sign a document stating you have no financial claim on the house, she'll come back. We'll start fresh, just us. Just us. As if I had never existed. The words hit me harder than anything she had said before. So this was the condition. Erase me legally, and the marriage survives. Ayan looked at me with desperation. Amy, maybe this is the only way. The only way. I sat down slowly, feeling the weight of decades on my shoulders. And what happens next time? I asked quietly. When something else makes her uncomfortable, do I sign away my dignity too? He didn't respond. She's scared, he said finally. She feels like she has no security. I almost laughed at the irony. No security. I had poured my entire financial safety net into that house. I was the one with no backup plan. And what about me? I asked gently. Do I not deserve security? He looked torn apart. I just want my family back. I am your family, I said softly. That night, neither of us slept. The next morning, Zara's father came alone. He didn't sit down this time. He stood in the living room, formal and stiff. We don't want this to escalate, he began. Divorce will damage both families, especially with a child involved. I nodded. I agree. So let's resolve it pragmatically. Sign away your financial claim. In exchange, you can stay here temporarily until you arrange other accommodations. Temporarily. As if I were a tenant and my investment, I asked calmly. He folded his hands behind his back. Consider it a gift to your son. A gift. A gift given under pressure is not a gift. It's surrender. I looked at him steadily. When we bought this house, you respected my contribution. Why does it become a gift now? His jaw tightened slightly, because holding on to it is destroying your son's marriage. There it was. The guilt, the emotional leverage. But here's the truth no one wanted to say out loud. The marriage was already fragile. My paperwork didn't crack it. It just exposed the fault lines. I will not sign anything, I said firmly. He stared at me for a long moment. Then prepare for consequences. Are those legal? I asked, or personal? He didn't answer. When he left, Ion looked defeated. Maybe we're all being stubborn. Maybe. I replied. Or maybe we're finally being honest. 2 days passed. Zara didn't return. She sent photos of Sophia to Ion, but avoided discussing the house directly. Instead, she focused on emotions. I don't feel safe. I don't feel prioritized. I feel second. That word haunted me. Had I unknowingly made her feel that way? Had my presence reminded her that Ion had a history before her? That he loved someone deeply before he ever met her? But love isn't a competition. It expands. It doesn't divide. On the 3rd day, Ion received official documents. Not divorce papers, but a formal notice requesting mediation regarding marital assets and clarification of third-party financial claims. Third party. That's what I had become. Not mother, not grandmother. Third party. Ion slammed the papers onto the table. This is insane, he muttered. They're preparing for divorce. And suddenly, something in him shifted. For days, he had been pleading for compromise, for peace. But seeing legal language made it real. She's turning this into a transaction, he said bitterly. Like I married into a contract. I stayed quiet. He looked at me with new clarity. You never asked me to choose. No, I said softly. Because I shouldn't have to. That afternoon, he drove to Zara's parents' house. He didn't tell me what he planned to say. When he returned hours later, his face was pale but strangely calm. It's over, he said simply. My heart skipped. What do you mean? She said she can't be married to someone who won't fully detach from his mother, financially and emotionally. Detach. As if love were a cord to be cut. And you? I asked carefully. He exhaled slowly. I told her I won't erase my mother to prove independence. The room felt very still. She said, then we have no future. And he looked at me with a mix of pain and awakening. I said maybe we don't. It wasn't dramatic. There were no screams, no broken plates. Just 2 adults realizing they had built their marriage on incompatible definitions of family. The divorce process moved faster than I expected. Zara's family pushed for a quick settlement. They wanted custody arrangements finalized, property divisions clarified, and reputations preserved. But here's where the irony deepened. Because during mediation, it became clear that my financial stake protected Ion more than anyone realized. Without my documented contribution, Zara could have claimed a much larger share of the house's value. My involvement complicated her position legally. It ensured the asset couldn't be treated as purely marital property. The same threat she feared became the reason the settlement stayed balanced. When her lawyer explained that, I saw something shift in her eyes during one meeting. Not anger, not even resentment, regret. She hadn't expected the situation to unfold like this. One evening, weeks into the process, Zara asked to speak to me alone. We met in a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. She looked thinner, tired. I didn't think it would go this far, she admitted. Neither did I. I replied honestly. She stared at her coffee. I thought if I pushed hard enough, you'd step back. I stepped back for months. I said gently. You just didn't notice. She swallowed. I was afraid. She confessed quietly, afraid that I'd never fully have my own space, that I'd always be compared. I never compared you, I said. I know, she whispered, but I compared myself. That was the first real honesty between us, but sometimes understanding comes too late. I never wanted divorce, she said, tears in her eyes. Then why make it conditional? I asked softly. She didn't have an answer. The papers were finalized 2 months later, joint custody, financial settlements. The house remained partially protected by my original claim, though Ian began planning to refinance and eventually buy out my share over time, not because he wanted me gone, but because he wanted clarity moving forward. The day the divorce was finalized, I sat alone in my room and let myself cry. Not because I regretted standing up for myself, but because families aren't supposed to break like this. And yet, as painful as it was, I also knew something else. If I had signed that paper, if I had erased myself to keep the peace, I would have lost something deeper than money. I would have lost my worth. Tell me honestly, was I wrong to hold my ground? Was protecting myself worth the collapse of their marriage? Or was that collapse inevitable the moment respect disappeared? Because what happened after the divorce surprised all of us, and it forced me to confront something even more complicated than conflict. Forgiveness. The day the divorce was finalized, I thought the worst was over. I thought once the papers were signed and the legal tension dissolved, we would all slowly settle into new versions of our lives. I was wrong, because endings don't feel like clean breaks. They feel like aftershocks. Sophia was only 9 months old when the divorce became official. Too young to understand custody schedules. Too young to know why her mother and father now lived in separate houses. But old enough to feel tension. Babies sense things. The first time Ian brought her back to our house after the custody arrangement started, she clung to him tightly, her little fingers gripping his shirt as if afraid of being put down. I stood a few feet away, unsure of my place. Was I still allowed to be daddy freely, or had I become the silent symbol of everything that went wrong? Ian placed her gently in my arms without hesitation. She missed you, he said quietly. My throat tightened. Sophia looked at me with wide eyes, then broke into a gummy smile. In that moment, something inside me softened in a way I hadn't allowed since everything fell apart. Whatever had happened between adults, this child was innocent. Weeks passed, the house changed, not physically at first, but emotionally. It no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like a space rebuilding itself. Ian threw himself into work. He was quieter, more reflective. I could see the weight he carried: guilt, heartbreak, maybe even doubt about whether he could have handled things differently. One evening, while Sophia napped upstairs, he sat across from me at the dining table and asked something I wasn't prepared for. "Do you hate her?" I looked at him carefully. "No." He frowned slightly. "After everything." I folded my hands together. "Hate is heavy. I've carried enough weight in my life." He looked down, processing that. "I don't hate her," I continued. "But I don't excuse what happened either. Two things can exist at once." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes I wonder if I failed both of you." I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "You failed to speak up early. That's different from failing us." Silence settled between us, but it wasn't hostile anymore. It was honest. About 3 months after the divorce, Zara asked to meet again. This time, it wasn't about lawyers or custody. It was about Sophia's first birthday planning. We met at a small cafe again, the same one where we had spoken during mediation. She looked different, not defeated, but humbled. "I've been in therapy," she said quietly after we sat down. I didn't react immediately. I simply listened. I realized something uncomfortable. She continued. "I wasn't fighting you. I was fighting my own fear of losing control." I let her words settle. "When my parents visit, they dominate everything," she admitted. "I grew up watching my mother compete with her in-laws. I swore I'd never feel that powerless. And so you tried to avoid it by pushing first," I said gently. She nodded, eyes glossy. I didn't see that you weren't trying to control anything. It was strange sitting there with the woman who once told me to book a hotel, now speaking vulnerably. I should have asked for boundaries respectfully, she said. Instead, I made ultimatums. I appreciated the honesty. But honesty doesn't rewind time. You hurt me, I said calmly, deeply. I know. And you hurt him, I added. Her face crumpled slightly. That's what I regret most. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no sudden hugging. Just two women acknowledging that pride and fear had collided too hard. Sophia's first birthday was small but peaceful. Both sides attended. No sharp comments, no passive-aggressive remarks, just careful politeness and a quiet understanding that everyone had learned something the hard way. But here's the part I didn't expect. Months after the divorce, Ian came to me with a proposal. Not about remarriage, not about reconciliation, but about the house. I want to refinance and buy out your share fully, he said one evening, not because I want you gone, but because I don't want you ever to feel financially trapped again. I looked at him carefully, and where would I go? He smiled softly. Nowhere. You can stay as long as you want, but I want you to have your money back, your independence. Independence. The word felt different now, healthier. After everything that happened, I realized something important. Financial clarity protects relationships. Ambiguity creates resentment. I had invested out of love, but without clear emotional conversations about expectations. That investment became a weapon neither side intended. The refinance process took time, but eventually my original contribution was returned to me, every rupee of it. When the transfer hit my account, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. For the first time in years, I had choices again. I renovated a small apartment nearby, not because I was forced to leave, but because I wanted space that was entirely mine. I still visited daily. I still helped with Sophia, but now it was by invitation, not assumption. The distance healed something. One afternoon, while Sophia played on the living room floor in my new apartment, Zara stood in the doorway watching quietly. She's lucky, Zara said softly. Why? I asked. She has a grandmother who fights for her own dignity. I didn't grow up seeing that. I didn't know what to say to that. Maybe this whole disaster wasn't just about conflict. Maybe it was about cycles, patterns of silence, of competition, of unspoken expectations between generations of women. I sometimes think back to that moment in the hallway, the casserole in my hands, Zara telling me to go to a hotel. If I had packed quietly and left without protest, maybe the marriage would have lasted longer. Maybe there wouldn't have been legal papers or painful conversations. But would it have been healthy? Or would resentment have grown quietly until something worse happened? Standing up for myself didn't cause the divorce. It revealed that the foundation was already cracked. And here's something even harder to admit. Part of me is grateful it happened sooner rather than later. Before Sophia grew up in a house full of silent hostility. Before years of suppressed bitterness turned into something uglier. Zara and I aren't best friends. We're not enemies either. We're two women who collided under pressure and learned too late how to communicate properly. She's rebuilding her life, Ian is rebuilding his, and I'm rebuilding mine. Do I wish it had ended differently? Of course, no mother dreams of watching her child's marriage collapse, but I also don't regret refusing to erase myself. So now, I want to ask you one final time, was I wrong? Should I have sacrificed my financial security and self-respect to preserve their marriage? Or was holding my ground the only honest choice available to me? Life has a way of forcing us into decisions we never wanted to make. And sometimes choosing yourself feels selfish until you realize it's the only way to teach others how to treat you. If you were on my side, like this video. If you think I should have handled it differently, Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your thoughts. And if you want to hear more real stories like this, about family, boundaries, and the complicated space between love and respect, make sure you subscribe. Share your final opinion on this whole mess below. I rate everything. I'll see you all in the next story.